My name's Jim Worthen. The show is Worthen One-on-One. We're here on Channel 17, Cox Cable in Santa Barbara every Monday at 2, Tuesday at 5, and Friday at 7. But that's just the cable platform. There are three other platforms. Mike Nicholson, our producer, has a Facebook page that he's going out on right now, in fact. And we have TV Santa Barbara website. You go to it, you go to the demand button, go to the bottom. I'm at the bottom of the stack, and Worthen One-on-One. Go to YouTube and put in Worthen One-on-One. And not only will this show be there on the two cable outlets, email, what are they called? Internet outlets, but past shows. The reason for that is we have a limited audience, and it's just those who haven't cut cable in the city of Santa Barbara and Goleta and Carpinteria and the south coast of Santa Barbara County. But we have an international audience through TVSB and YouTube and Mike's Facebook page. So you can share this. There'll be people who have interest in what we're doing that couldn't get us on the TV cable. So pass it along and tell them to ignore me, but the guests are always great. In fact, people ask me how I get such great guests after having about 300 of them, and I say, they're people I find interesting, and I think you will too. So,
No, you pay us.
You're worth what I pay you. I watch Greg Gutfeld on Fox, so I've got zingers, and I won't tell any poop jokes. I won't even mention poop, but he does a lot of poop on his show. The guest today is one that I've had on several times, and the continuing fight. And I think our title is something like Still Fighting. Cars are basic, cab. And I'll ask how many years they've been fighting, but then I want to go back and do a brief biography. Scott, how many years has cab been fighting?
As of this month, as of January 1st, 24 and a half years. We will be doing our 25th anniversary in June, and we plan on having a party.
Good. Well, stay tuned.
And you're paying for it.
Let's see. I guess M&M's.
There you go.
Where were you born?
Santa Barbara.
And what did your parents do? What did you do?
My mom was a teacher. My dad worked in title insurance.
Oh, TI or?
TI was the main company he worked with. He would float back and forth, and then TI would come in and say, look, we want you to go from Santa Maria to Ventura. And he had all the contacts, so.
He was a rep.
Yes.
He went and came to realtors like myself and said, what problems do you have? Come over to TI and we'll help you with it.
Exactly.
And so I probably met him many times.
Yes, you did.
Years ago. You went to school here?
Peabody, La Cumbre, La Colina, San Marcos, Santa Barbara City College.
Any siblings?
Brother.
A brother?
Yep.
He's still around?
He lives up north.
Up north meaning San Ynez or Seattle?
No, as in north of San Jose.
Okay. Your mother was a saint. I loved her dearly. There's three ladies that their children have asked me to, let me call a mom, and that was Mom Stoker, that was Mom Wenz, and who was the other lady? Now I just went blank on my old mind. It'll come to me as we're talking.
She was very intelligent. I mean, she was the first female head of a department in the Santa Barbara School District, and she ran the work experience program for Santa Barbara High School, San Marcos High School,
Wow.
and Dos Pueblos.
The other one that's still alive, and that's Mom Ehringer.
Oh yeah.
Right. Robert Ehringer's mother, who's now 94.
Wow.
But I love to say hi, Mom, because there's a twinkle in their eye when someone other than their own children are calling them Mom.
Sure.
Or they slap you. I never had that happen, but it may sometime.
Get in touch with me after the show.
You went from City College
Long Beach State.
to Long Beach State,
Yeah.
and you were involved in sports,
Yep. Double major, physical education, history.
physical education, and history of the United States or the Communist Party.
History of Latin America was my primary, and then my secondary was Southeast Asian history.
You got to know a little bit more about that, because at what point did you leave college and go to Vietnam?
I didn't go to Vietnam. I was drafted in 1969. Actually, I volunteered for the draft, and wound up at Fort Ord doing basic training, AIT, and then became a personal bodyguard, and tried to get to Vietnam. Wouldn't send me. 2 months short for those people.
You still have the Vietnam era.
No.
You didn't get the Vietnam.
No, I wasn't in country, and I don't have it.
Well, they gave a ribbon for just being in the service during Vietnam too.
Well, you have your basic national service ribbon. You have your good conduct ribbon, and then they've actually added another ribbon if you were during Vietnam.
So, not getting the good conduct ribbon, what did you do to cause that?
I didn't get court-martialed.
You didn't, huh?
No.
Well, in today's military, you might get court-martialed because I know enough about you is that you're not going to stick that needle in me, you know.
No, actually, when we went through, that was the first of the pneumatics, and you went down the line. This is your basic training. Your basic physical and so forth, and they had 4 or 5 different vaccines. And they had this pneumatic gun, no needles. They just put it up against your arm and bam.
Yeah, that's
one guy freaked on it, and he did this, and it's such a high pressure, it literally opened up the deltoid on his arm. Yeah.
So again, bodyguard in the military.
Yeah. I was a chaplain's assistant. The chaplain's assistant is 2 primaries. First off, the chaplain's corps back then would not take anybody who did not have a college degree. And I later found out one of the reasons they did is because they wanted somebody who could type. So and then the other primary that you had was in country, in combat. You stuck to the rear end of the chaplain as he was going through in combat. And your job was to protect him.
That reminds me of a story. The typing reminds me of a story. My dad, who was in the First War, used to say, even when I was in high school, ROTC, never answer a question that you don't have to. Because if you say, "Do you have a driver's license?" they ask you, you end up pushing a wheelbarrow.
Well, yeah.
So you answer, "I have a college degree. I'm a typist."
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and say it. You have an interview for the chaplain's corps, and I didn't know anything about it. And a friend of mine says, "Hey, this is a great job." So he drags me out of the barracks, and we go over, and I'm sitting there going, what the heck am I doing here? And so there's 4 chaplains and a career chaplain who was a full bird colonel.
Yeah.
And his question to me was, if Charlie steps out from a bush and levels a weapon at you, what would you do?
Charlie being the VC.
I'm sorry. The VC.
I like people would understand VC any more than Charlie, the Viet Cong.
The Viet Cong, yeah. And I looked at him. I said, "I'll blow his ass away." And he started laughing. He covers up his mouth. He's laughing so hard. And the other chaplains are going, "Oh, we want this guy." I didn't know what the job was. And so afterwards, I found out what the job was, and part of it was being a bodyguard.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty tough job in combat. A friend of mine that took my orders, I was really short, so the Army wouldn't send me to play coup. He took my orders, and Tom Black, great guy, and one of the first letters I got from him, he says, "You know what? They rocket us every night." I wrote back to him a very short letter. I said, "What did you expect?"
Yeah, exactly.
Pleiku is actually a pretty big base. It was, they were pretty well secured.
That was a war that was really hell, and unlike any other war, even today, when my dad went to France, it was for the duration.
Right.
When men went overseas in the Second World War, I had an employee and a cashier at a shoe store that I was running, and her husband went overseas. She had a baby. The baby died at 2 before he came home.
Oh, too bad.
He never saw his own child.
Yeah.
Because it was for the duration.
Yep.
Now, they break it's still pretty much if the duration. You hear guy after guy say, 4 tours, 7 tours. They keep going back with a slight break,
Mm-hmm.
rather than because we have the ability to fly them home for a little bit. But it isn't something that in Vietnam, guys were stuck for basically a year.
Yep.
And it's all they cared about was living a year. And
the thing that made it difficult about that is I had a number of good friends that were LERPs, and Wiley was telling me they yanked him. He had 3 weeks left, and they just yanked him, and I started laughing because I knew what he was talking about. They'd go out in 5-man teams, intelligence, and he'd take his bayonet out. They'd be taking a break, and he's looking for landmines. He's looking for booby traps. He just would not settle down. He only had a few weeks left.
yeah.
And so they finally said, "You're out of here." They took him back down to the base camp. And then they flew him back.
Well, fun stories, but let's talk about cab. Well, you for first, just finishing out your business history, you had alluded to your training in physical therapy and
Exercise physiologist. I have an advanced degree in exercise
so
physiology.
you were a tennis coach, a trainer here in Santa Barbara for many
football coach.
Yeah, for many years.
Yeah.
And I've run into guys that are getting pretty old that you trained, and they're 40 years old, and how they grow up, and I don't. I cultivate immaturity.
There you go.
The CAB was formed because of what planners were doing, trying to get rid of cars and get people either to carpool or to go to bicycles or walk.
Right.
Did I accurately?
Pretty much. What happened is that under 40 years ago, Dave Davis was the community development director for the city of Santa Barbara, and he was, and still is to this day, deathly anti-car. And he made an arrangement with a organization out of San Francisco called MIG to do urban planning in downtown. And the idea was, we'll take all the parking off of State Street, we'll widen the sidewalks, we'll put planters in, and everybody will see this wonderful park-like settings, and they will swarm to downtown. Well, that's not what happened. And so we're talking about another 15, almost 20 years later, and cabs, the starting board, we're looking around going, this is terrible. Literally, it's destroying the retail businesses of State Street, and it's having an effect upon the side streets as well. And our original board was Rachel Barnes, Alex Salcido, myself, Robert Bacchus, Tom Becker. All of these people were stalwarts within the community. We weren't activists. We're going, this is not working. And the council wasn't listening because they decided, well, we have this better idea.
Well, I always call people's attention to a place that didn't take parking off of their retail. When I came to Santa Barbara, there was parking along State Street, and still 2 lanes, some areas 4, and go to Bend, Oregon, and it's still, you drive, oh, there's a restaurant, next parking place that you want. Yeah. Or a sign says where the parking is off of the main street. But I fought with some of my friends in the pro.
Yep.
Yeah. One of them, dear friend, a good businessman. The other day, Warren Butler said, "Well, no, we don't." I agree we have to limit the parklets and we have to limit the bicycles, but it'll still have a promenade. I said, you know, be much better for Chase, which he is a managing partner. People driving along, I've heard this place chafe. Oh, there's a sign.
That's right.
I can turn at the next corner and find parking. And instead, of course, we can Google it, but it'll take you to, oh, you can't go down that street.
A good friend of mine came into town last week, and she wanted to do some shopping downtown. And I said, you have to understand, State Street's cut off. You can't be making turns here and there. And she says, you're right. She said it was just terrible. She hadn't been in town in, 30 years? And she said, what happened to State Street? Why is this city shut down? I said, because of bad planning. And these people will not admit to their failures. And their constant refrain is, we just need to make it a little bit bigger. And that has been the chant.
Yeah, my years in government and business, there's nothing as permanent as a temporary government program.
Oh. You are so right.
It's just, and as Ron Reagan used to say, the most terrifying words in the world are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you.
Exactly.
I get to call him Ron. We were close buds. And I want to go back to the formation. My recollection is that you had a terrible city council that was closing down and going with planners.
Right.
These are people that came out of Cal Poly and Davis and
UCLA.
And all of a sudden they got a job at 25 and they had the degrees, and then they began to work their way into the bureaucracy and get more and more power and put forward their ideas, usually, as you've pointed out many times, without any baselines, without any studies.
I call them handbook planners. They had in college this handbook, And they said, if you can get the people to do this, this is how wonderful it will be. Open up the handbook and start implementing the program. Forget whether or not the people are doing it.
Yeah.
And you can see downtown Santa Barbara. You can see San Francisco. You can see what's happening to San Jose. You can see what's happening to the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. They're cratering.
When I remember at the beginning of CAB, the traffic calming was starting out with bulb outs and
speed bumps.
Speed bumps in the middle
Yep.
of sometimes residential areas and mini roundabouts.
Yep.
And the council was just going along with Davis and the
Rubber stamp.
bureaucrats. And I'm not sure whether CAB caused it or CAB became helpful to 3 people who went on the city council
Yes.
fighting that.
Yep.
Michael Self,
Dale Francisco. Frank Hotchkiss.
and Frank Hotchkiss.
Okay.
They were later joined by Randy Rouse as a
Right.
city council member.
Right.
So the elected representatives of people who were suffering this anti-auto planning,
It was called Bulb Out Hell was the
Yeah.
nickname to it.
and it's come back after being
Yep.
voted out for 8 years by the city council. But what do they know? They just represent the people. Davis and the bureaucrats know better.
Here's my take on that, is that the arrogance of the people that came after that council majority. The people said, we do not want this any longer. And literally, when the first couple of votes were taken to stop this, there were parties. I mean, literally, not created by CAB, but people were having parties.
Oh, neighborhoods, you're not going to put a bulb out here and 3 speed bumps.
And so and people figured, okay, they voted for it. The city council can no longer change this. So Michael ran for a second term. She was defeated by
Michael Self.
Michael Self. She was defeated by Kathy Murillo by something like only a 1.5%. That's how close it was. The first thing that Kathy Murillo did as a city councilwoman, it was probably about 2 months afterwards, there was a proposal to put bulb outs on Figueroa and Delvina Street. And the city engineer that was representing the city at the time came into council and said, I cannot recommend this because the type of accidents you want to prevent will not be stopped at this location by this. And she kept hammering on it. She was now the deciding vote because it was now a 3-4 vote. And she said, I don't care. And she voted for it. And she championed it, multiple things. And CAB would come in. And when she became mayor and said, what justification do you have? And there is no justification. There's no statistical justification in the entire state of California. Not one city can prove that it's made pedestrians safer.
Well, it's a typical, and I could label a political party, I could label a political philosophy, but the way to tell the difference between that and the other parties is when you ask them why, they say, well, I feel it, I think maybe.
Yes, yes.
And
it's the way I think.
And then CAB and conservatives say, show me the statistics.
Right.
Show me the baseline. Show me the results. We can
right.
undo them.
That's right.
But if you can't give up on your feelings, so you never undo it.
It's one of those things where you just kind of look at them and you go, you've got to be kidding me. And my saving grace on the board of CAB is that I'm a research scientist. I've done a number of research projects. I've created a product of my own, a hardware product and so forth. So I can see, okay, this is the stepwise. This is where you have to go to get to here. Does it work? And if it doesn't work, guess what? You don't do it. And so that was what I brought to the original CAB board. And they're kind of going, that's a good point, Scott. And I wasn't the spokesman of CAB at that time. It was Vachel and Alex, and occasionally Tom Becker. And we'd go before the council saying exactly what you said. Show us the proof. The council, the entire 24 and a half years that CAB has been around, not one council, not one, has been able to prove that any of these projects have worked. They are leaders of failure. I mean, literally, they're leading the path of failure, and they say, but this is how wonderful it is. And you kind of go, what? What's going on?
Well, the bureaucratic mind is so set in, I found the answer, I'm right.
Yep.
My example of it is I was aide to the then Assemblyman Don McGilvery, former mayor.
Right.
And we got called to the Coyama Valley because they were going to close all the water systems there down. 2,000 people, and because they'd done tests on the water, and those tests showed that there was between a 10 and 20% probability of a blue baby being born because of that water. Their mother using that water would cause this birth deficiency. And we heard them, and I asked a stupid question. Must have been channeling you. I said, well, in the last 100 years, there's probably been 2,000 babies born of women in this valley. How many blue babies were there born? When they quit stuttering, they had to say none. And that was the end of them closing down those wells.
Well, it's interesting because I'll take a leap of faith on that one. There was on KYT the other day a big deal about the Toro Canyon, and there's this oil leak.
Yeah.
And it's going down the creek. And I'm just going, okay, and so, because I can remember being a kid where there was oil in the Toro Canyon Creek. Why? Because of a natural seep. They said, oh, no, it has to do with the fact that there was drilling up there. I said, and I'm thinking, no, there was a natural seep up there.
And that's why they drilled.
And that's why they drilled, right? And so the ecologists, the people that say we want to bring back nature, then by trying to keep the oil out of the creek are actually trying to defeat returning the area of Toro Canyon back to what it was before the Spanish came in, because there was creeks all over the place that had oil in them.
Well, we could go down that road to the tar on our feet for till probably about 1980. If you were here and you went to the beach, you got heavy tar on your feet, and then we had that oil blowout, and 69, and boy, that showed how bad it was. And then they discovered that there was a natural seep that in a year put out like 20% of what the blowout had, and it was going on forever. And a commission was set by the then President Richard Nixon. They studied it and they said, well, there's one answer. Drill more wells in the ocean and relieve the pressure. And when they did,
it relieved the pressure.
And now they've stopped and we've got tar back on the beach.
And yes, you're absolutely right. The tar is slowly coming back because of the gas pressure.
Yeah, well, the people say it must be those rigs. Well, most of the rigs are silent now.
Yep.
But it's the natural seeps.
That's right.
So CAB came along and was very successful for about 10 years.
Yep.
Having coalitions and community groups and people who got elected
Right.
and were there some 8 years, some only 4, and got some people appointed like Randy Routs in that day, who went with the other people there to protect the communities. And then it slowly went the other way,
Right.
to where toward the end, Randy was the only semi-sensible voice.
Well, first off, I'd like to step in here real quick. CAB is not a political action group.
Oh no,
CAB is a 501c3. We have never endorsed any council candidate. Not one.
no, you were, but you were a resource for
Yes.
them to look to,
Yes.
instead of to be castigated as the current council.
You're right.
An interesting thing, right? We'll get to more of State Street later, but an interesting thing in Wendy McCaw, the publisher of the News Press, does a wonderful, it's usually very upbeat, New Year's message on New Year's Day in the paper. And this year it wasn't so.
She did her best.
She talked about State Street, but the one thing I want to point out now is the difference between Santa Barbara, it's wrestling with promenade and parklets and
Right.
businesses going away, and Solvang, who locked down, had a parklets, closed their main street, as almost everybody was forced to by higher government, and then as soon as they could,
Yep.
got rid of it.
Yep.
And her point was, we have almost reverse mirror government.
Yep.
The government in Solvang is conservative with maybe one kind of independent, and the government in Santa Barbara is ultra left with maybe one kind of independent.
Right.
And just look at the results.
Well, one of the things, I went up to Solvang just as the pandemic was lifting. They still had First Street cut off. They had the parklets out and so forth. And I'm walking around and I'm going, because I love Solvang.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have family over there anymore, but used to. And I'm looking around, I'm going, wait a minute, what's going on here? There are more people out. There's people in the shops. The community is more vibrant than anything going on in South County. And I started looking around, I said, because they have open circulation.
Yeah.
They haven't shut things down to that degree. They only had one small street shut down, the rest of it was open. And the tourists were coming back, and they liked the fact that they could walk around. They could like the fact that they could go into the park without problems. And they're driving into town. And so, boom, Solvang was back long before State Street was shut down.
Well, sometimes the smaller communities have the benefit of not hiring very expensive and career
Yeah.
planners and city attorneys that you have to fire for malfeasance, and big staffs. Most cities have a part-time city attorney. They come in, do the job for the city, and they get paid for that job, but they aren't. That's not their. They're not looking for another 50,000.
And this is one of the problems I've seen out in Goleta. All of a sudden, within the last 2 years, Goleta is exploding in civil service jobs. A bunch of people that left Carpinteria have moved in to jobs in the city of Goleta. Some people from the city of Santa Barbara are now in the jobs in the city of Goleta. And you see a city that only has 26,000 people. It's not a very big city. And all of a sudden, they have this, what amounts to the lifer mentality of civil servants. well, we have our retirement, and this is what we're going to do, and we'll be telling the council won't be telling us.
Yeah. Well, we have eyewitness accounts of one of those civil servants when the city was trying to pass a tax increase and did, going out and taking down the anti-tax signs.
As a matter of fact, a friend of mine who used to be on the council was notified by a Goleta resident that had put up some of those signs and said, we've been watching City of Goleta employees stealing our signs. We want to know where they are, and we want them back. And he went in, he said, I've been notified that this is what you've been doing. And the city employee of the City of Goleta was very sheepish about it and said, yeah, they're all over here. He said, you give them back to them. You stole their private property.
Yeah, it's not vandalism like you go by and knock a sign down.
Right.
When you take it to keep it so they can't put it back up, then that's theft.
And the City of Goleta is having further problems with its. I don't want to get into that, so let's go on to another subject because.
Yeah, we're back with Cab, and the next real fight that I remember, which we've been fighting and not winning. You may be able to tell me where we've won some, is roundabouts. I mean, there's a roundabout on Garden Street. It's just a planter in the middle of the street that you have to go around, I think at Victoria. And I get to it, and I go left in front of it.
I would beg to differ with you. It's not a roundabout. It's a deflection device. Okay, and I find it very interesting.
I got one of those deflection devices.
And I found it very interesting that one of the residents that had been co-opted by Van Hengel and Dayton, and this is green and we want it wonderfully, and I live right next to there, and he came back 2 months after it was put in. He said, I can't get out of my driveway safely. Yeah. And we told him, I mean, literally, we told him, this is going to be a problem for you. He was so co-opted by the propaganda that when the actuality in the street was put there, he's going, this is dangerous.
Well, speaking to that, going back to bulb outs and the supposed protection of non-car citizens, when I go up Garden Street, if there's a bicycle ahead of me, I have to really be careful, because is he going to slow up and let me go through, or is he going to go through and I better, honor him and as I should, but it adds to the danger to the bicyclist.
We love this one. In what would today be called an open mic moment, Drusilla Van Hengel, who was then the Alternative Transportation Coordinator for the City of Santa Barbara, PhD, full of herself, and yes, Drew, you want to come after me for that, feel free.
Well, at least you're not Gutfeld talking about what happens when you're full of yourself.
No. And she mentioned, with the mic on, at a TCC meeting, that the primary reason she wanted bulb outs on the streets is to force bicyclists out in the streets to slow the traffic. And you're just kind of going, in other words, you want to take the Bicycle Coalition that you're on the board, and you want to take their members and use them as cannon fodder when they are safer to the right of the street.
Well, I'm so old that I prefer the teaching that a bicycle is a vehicle and has the same right to that lane as I do, and I have to pay attention, and they have to signal, and they have to ride with traffic, and we don't need bike paths because that confuses things. I haven't found a bike path that I haven't passed during a day that there wasn't some yo-yo coming wrong way on a one-way street.
Or they're riding on the line.
Yeah. Well, and then what they do is they're coming, well, use Haley Street. They're coming in the bike path the wrong way, and then all of a sudden they decide they're going to this restaurant over here and they cut right in front of you.
I was just on to Haley last week, and exactly the same thing happened.
Yeah.
And
that's why we need a little difference in our law enforcement.
wait until they get the new bike path on Gutierrez and Salinas. Yeah, I mean, you can't. First off, the city of Santa Barbara violated the law by putting on the agenda for a vote an item that did not totally include all the items under it. They were given a letter by cab stating you can't do this. The city administrator is responsible for making sure the agenda brought before the council is correct. She allowed it to go forward. And so you've got a whole bunch of stuff going on at the city of Santa Barbara.
Well, that's back to the roundabouts. I don't recall any roundabout, and some of them the bike path ends in the block of the roundabout, but I don't recall any roundabout with a bike lane.
Yes.
There is one?
No. Here's the deal. If you'll notice the APS roundabout,
Mm-hmm.
if you notice the Melpis roundabout, if you notice all the other roundabouts except for the little micro ones that they have on streets, they all have devices to separate the traffic and then meter it into the roundabout, which means that the very concept of the roundabout on urban streets in the design that they put in Santa Barbara is false. The federal government, the Department of Transportation said, you do not put roundabouts of the size of Carpinteria and APS and the Cliff Drive roundabout on urban streets because it will cause congestion.
Well, but
that's the federal government.
But for sake of these Cal Poly, UCLA, and Davis people who were trained in traffic policy.
Oh, you mean the handbook guys?
Yeah, it works in Europe.
Wait a minute, Buckwheat. Here's the bottom line. You'll take a look at the majority of the European roundabouts. They're massive. If they're on a major street, they're acres.
Is that why the Tour de France goes, it looks like they're going...
That's right. The angle of deflection is so large that they can go right through it. Now, I've had friends that were raised in England, and they would come up to me, and they're Masonic friends, Lodge brothers, and they go, yeah, but we grew up around these, and they work fine. I said, oh, really? Okay. And when was the last time you were back to England? He said, oh, about 35, 40 years ago. So they went back to their hometowns, and all of a sudden the population density was large. It wasn't the rural, semi-rural area. It wasn't San Ynez Valley. It was Santa Barbara. And they're going, the roundabouts don't work because of the mass of people driving on the streets. And I said, there's your answer.
Yeah, I drive, when I'm going to Lompoc where my son lives, I usually drive to Buellton and then across. And
246.
And then I get to the roundabout at
La Purisma.
Yeah, La Purisma Road, and I remember that roundabout killed a fireman.
That's right. And I went after District 5, Caltrans in San Luis Obispo, and I pointed out, you demanded that roundabout go in. You designed that roundabout. We warned you that that would be a problem. And under emergency conditions, it rolled a fire truck and killed a firefighter. And now you're now complacent. By design, the state of California is guilty of manslaughter.
It was terrible that it was rather new, so the fire crew probably hadn't gone around it.
Right.
and they came roaring through the fog, and it rolled the fire truck and killed him.
Here's another example: the 246 154 roundabout up by the casino. Okay, up on 154. That is a pile of junk. It is badly designed. They've had multiple accidents up there, and 2 days ago they had a Kia come through the roundabout, not negotiate it properly, tore out the undercarriage of it, and had to be towed away. If you go to the highway patrol people, they have been given a gag order. They can't talk. But if you talk with these guys privately, they say, go to the Twitter account, take a look at the number of accidents, and you'll see why we hate that 154 roundabout.
I know people, almost everybody I know thinks that the Las Positas roundabout's great. It is a little bigger, but
No, it's not.
It's bigger than Milpas.
No, it's not.
Really?
That's right.
It just has more grass around the outside.
Exactly. Now,
and an ocean on that side. But
Yes.
what I have asked people about anything that the government wants to do in infrastructure.
right.
If you take that money and don't spread it out over the state's giving you this money for this highway project, and say it's mainly servicing the 190,000 people or the 50,000 people in our area, and this is how much it's costing. At one time, the Crosstown Freeway, where we used to have lights, pretty cheap, $30 or $40 million when they finally did it. If you divided it by the population of Santa Barbara, that was the most heavily in Santa Barbara County, it was like every person was paying $1,000 back there 30 years ago. That meant a family of four was paying $4,000 a year to avoid stopping twice at the lights. And I thought, if you think about the changes in infrastructure and focus more on, it isn't money from the federal government, that comes from us too. It isn't money from California. And what's that group that you like that has city council and supervisors and
SBCAG?
SBCAG.
Our Friendly County Association of Governments.
Oh, so that's where the witches get together in their cauldron and plot against us.
Don't go there. The SBCAG has two transportation groups. One is North County and one is South County. Here's where North County is getting shafted. Until the realignment of the districts having to do with population, having to do with the census going back 10 years ago, First district was in South County. Second district was in South County. Third district was the only district that slopped over into the North County.
But it was mainly Isla Vista.
Yeah, and so the third district supervisors still met on the North County Transportation Committee, but they were outvoted. Now what happens is First District has been curled around up into Cuyama. And the Cuyama people do not want First District supervisors up there. They don't want the transportation planning. They don't want a whole bunch of stuff that the First District is bringing out of the South County. They said, you're here because the law requires it. We don't want you here. And Salud Carbajal found that out, and now Das Williams is finding it out. He does not receive good vibes when he goes up there. But he has that vote, and it's changing how North County is working, and it's changing to the detriment.
So we have to watch what CAB tells us about what's going on with SBCAG, right? You give an update every week about things before.
We try to. Sometimes it's difficult.
You do very well with informing what's happening at Carpinteria Council, what's happening at Buellton, all the different cities. And you, more than any of the CAB members, appear before the different bodies, the city, SB CAG. Well, what are there? 7 cities.
Well,
You don't get up to Santa Maria though.
Santa Maria, it's an hour and a half drive.
Yeah.
And I do go to.
Wait. When did it become less? For me, it's always been 50 minutes.
Yeah, well, I don't have lead in my foot.
Oh.
And when you drive the kind of car that I drive, it's very visible. And the highway patrol kind of goes, I get waves from the highway patrol because they like my car.
Yeah.
I get waves from the local cops.
Tell the people what the car is.
66 Mustang Fastback. And it drives very nicely.
Very nice. What we have to watch for is a continuation of the spread of, and I want you to tell us the most dangerous, the spread of bike paths in a time when people started to think about them, and since that time, 15 years ago, the use of bikes has dropped in half, right?
It's dropped worse than that.
Yeah.
The problem is that the city of Santa Barbara highest bike count was in the early 1980s. There wasn't a single bicycle path on the streets. And then the anti-car, pro-bike people came in and said, guess what? We'll make it safer, and look at all the people we have now. We'll double the amount. Well, the city of Santa Barbara, in cooperation with the Bicycle Coalition, stopped doing bike counts in 2013. The reason they did is because the numbers kept doing this, and they knew better than to try to fudge the numbers, because CAB was formed in 1998. We started monitoring different locations, and we'd go out and take a look and say, okay, this is what's going on here. Then we'd see what the city was reporting, because they were using Bicycle Coalition people to do the counting, and we go, you know what, this doesn't look quite right.
Well,
that's when the numbers dropped.
I drive Cathedral Oaks frequently, and there is a beautiful bike path behind the junior high school and the elementary school, and then to Fairview. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone on it.
Well, actually, I do see, but a former Goleta council member who I was talking with, and I said, Goleta has a problem. It's violating CEQA by doing this planning. And I said, the plans that the city has put in are not working. They put in a, quote, multimodal path. That's the new name for a bike path, by the way.
A what?
A multimodal path, okay? And from Pacific to Elwood on Hollister, there are fewer bicyclists now on that strip since it was built, and it's more dangerous. And he agreed. And I said, look at the number on the Cathedral Oaks, because you have it out by Dos Pueblos High School, and like you were saying, down by the junior high and so forth. I said, are there more bicyclists? He says, no. Yeah. I said, that will tell you, this is not an issue of planning. It's not an issue of design. It's an issue of culture.
Yeah, when at the very time that the people who use their feelings to drive us thought that there'd be more bicycles.
Yep.
There's more cars. Teenagers don't like riding their bicycle the minute they can get a car. The alcoholics use Uber and other transportation, where they used to only use the bike when they couldn't use their driver's license. The minority, documented and undocumented, and citizen even, service people all of a sudden can afford cars.
Well,
you go by a field.
No. It wasn't that they couldn't afford it. The state of California changed the DMV law and said you can get a driver's license even if you're an illegal.
Yeah.
And the minute that happened, the bike numbers in downtown Santa Barbara and Goleta dropped almost 50%.
Well, but to argue with you, at the same time, what we're paying for labor has gone up, so it makes it easier to afford a car.
Okay,
And
okay. Yeah.
they finally figured out that labor was a small component of the final products that we use. It was 10-15%. By the time you bought them in the supermarket or got your little tray or bag of berries out of the freezer, that paid that. So all of a sudden, a good picker, the minimum a picker is making 15. A good picker is making $25 an hour. He can afford that car.
Yeah.
We're running out of time. Tell people where we meet, where they can see your.
The average cab meeting is at the Santa Barbara IHOP at State and Valerio. We meet the last Wednesday of the month at 6:30 in the evening. They are.
You don't have to eat.
Well, they're very kind to us. Okay,
Yeah.
They gave us the area for free. The trade-off is you have to order something.
No.
Okay, so the majority of people order, which is fine. So we meet the last Wednesday of the month at 6:30 in the evening. We discuss transportation issues. We have invited any and all elected officials to let us know, and we will set up a meeting for you. None of them have done it. So.
Well, our meetings have been averaging. No, I shouldn't talk to just the holidays, but they've been averaging between 10 and 15 people.
Yeah.
We'd be glad to have 50 people.
Yeah.
So-
And if we could get an elected official to show up and justify what they're doing without, see, they hide behind the 3-minute rule. You go to a council meeting and they say,
Now, we have to be fair to our mayor. He came and he took questions.
Yes.
And he
Randy
was very candid.
Yes, and by the way, was I or was I not hardcore on anybody who gave him a hard time? I said you have to be respectful.
Yeah, I think we have to keep working with him and praying for him, because I'm observing him more and more being sucked into the bureaucrats being right. I'm sorry to say.
Uh-oh, that's the music.
Yeah, that's
Happy New Year.
It's way early. We've got 25 minutes. Don't look at the clock, but we've got 25 minutes. We've been putting the email address and the website.
Right.
And the website's easy to go to.
Yes.
Cars are basic.
Yeah. Just send us an email. If you want some of our information, we will put you on the cab email list.
Great. Well, I guess that I was reading that wrong. Old eyes. It isn't 20. It was 25 seconds, not 25 minutes.
Happy New Year.
Scott, thank you very much, and I'll see you.
See you at the end of the month.